Welcome to Mona Lisa Has No Eyebrows, a show about art, artists, and artworks, and the wacky weirdos and wahoos within. My name is Michael, and I am joined here by Stephanie and May, and we each brought a wonderful fact about art. So without further ado, Stephanie.
Okay, I'm up first. This fact came from that one episode that we did with Amy Bauer, and I had brought up this artist named Lee Miller, who gained notoriety as Man Ray's assistant and girlfriend. Okay, I think that's my theme. I like famous male artists, and then I look for like their female companions and the overlooked, female artists in their life, and Lee Miller is certainly one of them. So my fact about her, to kind of give you an idea of what kind of person she is during World War II, she became a photojournalist in the war, and she was one of the first to arrive at Hitler's secret apartments. And she took a bath in Hitler's tub and slept in his bed. And all right, weird. Why? Wasn't she freaked out? But she was a very ballsy woman. She went through so much in her life, and she was a model, and she became a model because she was rescued from being run over in the street by the publisher of Condé Nast magazines, who happened to look at her and be like, "Oh, you're beautiful. You should be a model." It's like
Wow.
her life is really, very cinematic, like a
Right.
movie. And she became Man Ray's assistant because she just showed up at his place in Paris and said, "I want to work with you." And I'm sure he just took one look at her and was like, "Yeah, okay." And then they were together and collaborated on a lot of famous, works. And when she broke up with him to marry some Egyptian dude, that's when he created that piece with a metronome that I was telling you guys about. Shoot, now I can't remember the title of that piece, but it was,
Like destroy this work or something, right?
yeah, basically take a photo of the eye of the person who, broke up with you, and then like stick it on this metronome and let it go until you can't stand it anymore, and then take this hammer and smash it.
Crazy.
But in an interesting twist, like they reconciled, and they were friends for the rest of their lives. So very interesting lady. Okay, so I'm gonna start out with that. What did you guys find out about her?
Well, one thing I have to say is that when she went to Man Ray to become his apprentice, she said like, "I am your new student and apprentice," and he's like, "I don't have any students and apprentices," and she was like, "You do now."
Yeah,
uh,
like I said,
the cajones.
Yeah, she really, I was watching a lot of videos on her, and a lot of people were saying like she really fought for herself, and she was a very strong woman, and just like her attitude comes out in everything that she does, especially pertaining to your fact, Stephanie. It's just like, who would do that? But Lee Miller, she would do that. She had like just what Michael's saying, like she had the balls.
Yeah, and yeah, not only did she take the bath and slept in Hitler's bed, but in the picture you can see she's got her dirty boots that she was wearing when she went to Dachau, the concentration camp, and she just like put them on his like pristine white bath mat, and she was just bathing, washing off the dust.
Yeah,
I
did
love
you
it.
see? There's also a portrait of Hitler that she put next to the bathtub.
Oh yeah.
So this kind of like weird, obviously a lot of messaging in her photo, and she set it up intentionally very much with the boots, but also little subtleties of his portrait and um yeah.
It's
Yeah.
kind of like, watch me do this thing to your pristine apartment, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, she
Uh,
walked all over him basically.
Mm. And I don't know if you guys read about like when she was still living at home with her parents. Her dad was a photo enthusiast, and
Oh.
he's the one that I guess taught her and her brother photography. But he also used her as a model and took some inappropriate nude photos of her
Yeah,
as
nude photos. Yeah.
as like a young woman into her teens. And there was like an incident where she was raped when she was like 7, or sexually molested, to the degree where she caught gonorrhea. I'm like, whoa. And like, certain facts about her talk about her like promiscuity and things like that, which is, I guess, like associated with a lot of people of like sexual abuse and stuff like that. So she's obviously had issues. So to what degree that affected like her like outspokenness and her like fearlessness when it came to like using her sexuality, or indulging in it, I guess, who knows. And it turns out like that Egyptian dude that she married, that she left Man Ray for, well, she ended up leaving him for the guy that she was doing all the photojournalism with in World War II, and ended up having his kid, and then like broke up with the Egyptian guy. And so she's had her things, but she also dealt with like PTSD after World War II, and it's like, and not to mention suffering sort of the obscurity of just being relegated to like being Man Ray's assistant and not like getting her due.
So speaking on that note, I was kind of watching a few videos about Lee Midler's time with Man Ray and the work that they were making together in the dark room. And I don't know how familiar you guys are with photography, but there's a specific technique called solarization that you can achieve by manipulating the chemicals and the development process. So Man Ray became really famous for his solarized photographs, and it's actually due to Lee Midler. And the story goes, they were in the darkroom together, and Man Ray was exposing some photos. I think Lee might have been doing it as well. And then all of a sudden, a rat runs across her foot, and she freaks out. So she turns the light on, which is the biggest no-no in the darkroom. You never turn on the white light when you have your materials out in the darkroom. And so in the frustration of, Man Ray's like literally making a photograph when Lee turns the lights on, he's like, well, whatever. And then he like stuffs the photo paper that he was exposing onto into the development bath. And then the development process happens, and they take a look, and all of a sudden it's solarized. And so this whole concept and beautiful technique that Man Ray ended up utilizing in a lot of his future works, Lee kind of started it off with this rat that just ran across her foot and turning the light on. So it was actually really cool to find out about that, because I've done some solarized photos too. So to think of it being like, oh, this happened by accident, like he wasn't, purposefully trying to figure out how to make this happen. So the connection is there. It's pretty cool.
Ah, that's really great. Nice. I did not know about that. And, as with so many things that humanity has discovered, accidentally.
Yeah,
exactly. Add that to the list.
Yeah. Beautiful accidents. Totally. And Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think it's crazy as far as her photography. It's crazy that she took the pictures of the war, of the concentration camps, and Vogue actually published those. Vogue, the fashion magazine.
Yeah,
it's so that's how much respect they had for her, I guess.
Astounding. It'd be like, Vogue publishing photos from the Vietnam War. Right? I don't know if they've done it, like the killing fields in Cambodia or something like that. I don't know. Maybe they did and I never knew about it.
I don't think so. I think that was like the most kind of harrowing images that they ever did. I never heard of any other ones.
Yeah, but I guess it was because of her connection at Vogue.
Yeah.
So did you guys read about like why her modeling career ended, which I thought was so funny and just whatever? So one of her photos, she was a very popular model, very famous fashion model, and then one of her photos was used without her knowledge or permission in a Kotex ad, for menstrual products. And apparently, like that just blacklisted her from being a model.
Oh,
really?
Okay, this is the weird dichotomy of like the feminine ideal and the feminine reality. It's like, every woman at some point in her life, for the most part, menstruates. But it's like this horrible, shameful thing that even being in an advertisement for it somehow makes you undesirable. And yet, the act of menstruating is what makes you fertile. And that has always been the benchmark for beauty and desirability throughout history. So
Right.
there is such a disconnect, especially in America, between like bodily processes and like our I don't know, puritanical heritage or something like that. We just cannot deal with the body.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
Right.
taboo.
Totally
Totally.
taboo.
It's so, when I read that, it was another head shaking moment, like, oh God.
Yeah, how weird. So wait, so they didn't have permission to use her in that ad,
Like,
or?
I don't know what the usage rights were like back then. I'm sure like the photographer, whoever took her photo, probably owned the rights and just said, oh yeah, here, yeah, you want to use this image, go for it. And she probably, nobody asked her. She had no idea it was happening until it hit the magazines or whatever. And,
Wow.
next thing she knows, it's like, oh, you're associated with this dirty product. You can't continue modeling. It's like,
Yeah. Right.
Wow.
oh.
And it's funny, in a typical Lee Miller fashion, when she went to do the war photographs, she had a special kind of uniform made on Savile Row, and I think that's kind of the badassness and fashion of Lee Miller that
Nice.
she embodied.
Wow.
I like that a lot.
Nice.
Yeah. And she was really stunningly beautiful, and all the
Yeah.
photos that you see of her, it's like, yeah, I
was a
could
model.
see why, people kind of went nuts for her.
Yeah, I actually have more on her and Man Ray, and just like stepping off of that, where, she was really beautiful and Man Ray really fell for her. So like going back to your fact about the metronome, you could tell that he was so heartbroken because of how much passion he had for her. And there's now like a house with a collection of where she used to live and a bunch of art pieces and everything. And Man Ray went to visit that house, and actually left a suitcase behind there to be like, I'm still part of this, like leave behind little breadcrumbs to like somehow still be in her life. And then there's actually a book where you like sign, like when you go into a gallery or something like that, you can leave your signature. And he writes this phrase of, I love Lee and Roland, because he ended up developing a good relationship with her husband. But the only way you can read like that phrase, I love Lee and Roland, is at this really warped, skewed perspective. So you have to like step back and look at the pages almost level. So just interesting how he kind of like, I think he just never got over her, and he had to do all these little weird things here and there. And then even more so, that's more specific to the metronome, is when they were dating, he had taken this really lovely photograph of her standing in the window with a veil. And so there's like a pattern coming off of the veil or the curtain onto her body. And the original photograph, you see, her head down to her torso. But the photograph that he published to the world, he actually cut her head out of the image. So it's kind of like same realm as the metronome of being like, I used to love this woman, but fuck her.
You really acted like a middle schooler or something,
right?
In a sense.
Gosh darn
But they
artist.
ended up, yeah. But from what I understood, they ended up having a really nice relationship. So
yeah, they were good friends for a long time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's nice.
Yeah, and then apparently she was like a championship cook at the end of her life
Oh,
in like
really?
the 60s. Yeah, so
Wow.
she was. They published in 2017 a book called Lee Miller: A Life with Food, Friends, and Recipes, which is she entered recipe competitions and frequently won. And she recreated dishes from like Egypt by memory alone. She trained in the 50s. She trained in Paris in Cordon Bleu cookery, and she did over like 12,000 recipes, and also satisfied Picasso's craving to sample the English Christmas pudding. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a lady.
right? What a lady. And that brings us to fact number 2, which is May's fact.
Okay, so my fact I learned about while I was in photo class many years ago. And I remember learning about this artist and just being like, what? So here's my fact. And I'm going to start off with the facts, but then I'm going to give you some context into who the artist was, and then we can take it however you want to go from there. So, my fact is that on September 8th, 1985, Ana Mendieta had died from falling out of her 34th floor apartment window in New York City, Greenwich Village, at 300 Mercer Street, where she lived with her husband of 8 months, minimalist sculptor Carl Andre, who may have pushed her out of the window. She fell 33 stories onto the roof of a deli. Just prior to her death, neighbors heard the couple arguing violently. There were no eyewitnesses to the event that led up to her death, but there was a recording from Andre's 911 call that had him saying, "My wife is an artist and I'm an artist, and we had a quarrel about the fact that I was more exposed to the public than she was. And then I went to the bedroom and I went after her. Oh, sorry. And then she went to the bedroom and I went after her and she went out the window." So Andre was tried and acquitted of her murder. And during the 3 years of legal proceedings, Andre's lawyer described Mendieta's death as a possible accident or suicide. So the judge ended up finding that Andre was not guilty on the grounds of reasonable doubt. So I'll pause there.
Wow.
Because, yeah, when you hear that, you're just like, sorry, what?
What?
She fell out the window, like, you know.
Yeah, it's such like the typical cockamamie story. And then like if your wife fucking falls out a window when you call the cops, do you go into the fact that she was a disgruntled artist? It's like that is just so
yeah.
My God.
That just makes me so mad.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know if you guys saw that documentary Wormwood, but it's a similar situation where it's like, well, he just fell out the window. It's like, you were in the room. Like you can't just say someone falls out a window, or like you can't say, oh, they just decided to jump out the window, because then you go to all their friends and their family and you can kind of assess, were they suicidal, were they depressed, this and that. And obviously like you'll probably get some people saying, sure, yeah, they were, but it's just such like a ridiculous claim to say that someone just jumps out a window or someone just falls. Like you don't do that. It's not a thing.
It is extremely fishy, very fishy. So I didn't know. Oh, sorry. Did you want to go on about?
I have a lot, so I don't know. Like I don't want to take up too much time, but I have a lot more that I could say. Up to you guys.
Well, I'll just tell you what I learned, because I did not know about her at all before you presented the facts. So I just kind of, did some like looking up, and she comes from a very privileged background in Cuba. She's one of the first feminist, artists to deal with the feminine body, and also goes into the occult, with the Santeria and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I found her work like really avant-garde, and she's really one of those pioneering artists whose life was just tragically cut short, and unfortunately not very many people know about her, including myself. So I was really and then she does the silhouette work with the land body art and all that kind of stuff. So I was really glad to know about her, and it was just sad that I didn't know about her before. So
she's got some. Sorry.
Go ahead, Michael. Sorry.
She's got some really interesting works. Like I like the one that was Moffat building piece, which is where she spilled a puddle of pig's blood, and then she kind of recorded how people reacted to it to show that New Yorkers are kind of desensitized to violence.
Yeah,
But
she took like 30 photographs before the actual like deli owner outside of where she spilled the blood came out to clean it up.
yeah,
So there wasn't anyone that was like, "Oh my gosh, what is this?" It was
right.
just like even the deli owner was just like, "Okay, I'm done. Like this isn't this has gone long enough."
Oh my God, I hope that wasn't the same deli where she died.
No, I don't think
Okay.
so. I hope
I was just
not.
Right?
like, ah.
Yeah, it's a good question. I actually looked it up on Google Maps to see if it's still there. And you can see a really tall building. I don't know if it's the same one that, she used to live in with Carl Andre, but there's no deli there anymore. So,
Oh.
Hmm.
yeah. But just a little bit of context about who she was off of like what Stephanie was just saying. So she was sent to Iowa when she was 12, but she was born in Cuba into like a very prominent family that was rich in the country's politics and society. So her dad sent her and her sister off to kind of be away from the negative things that kind of brings into the family. And so she ended up jumping around from different foster homes, separated from her sister, and eventually she ended up, going through high school and finding a passion for art making. And then she ended up going to the University of Iowa to pursue an art degree. So from there, she kind of started to find her interest in the themes of connecting her body to the land. And so the photo that I have for her piece is the Silhouette series, where she kind of creates an embossed image of her silhouette in different landforms. Some of them is just like a silhouette. Others is her actual body that she photographed with these like beautiful plants coming off of her in the water, like a bunch of shells and stuff. So, like Steph was saying, she wasn't really known for her work because she died so young. But after her, I'm going to call it her murder, um, a lot of feminist kind of groups got together because she was very much a feminist, kind of tying in with me, Lee Miller. She was headstrong, stubborn, knew what she wanted in life, did all the stuff that she wanted to do. And then her life was cut so short, which is just so terrible. But because of all of her friends that knew her as who she was, they started a lot of these kind of protests when Carl Andre started to show at MoMA and other kind of galleries. So there was a movement called Carl Andre is at Mocha Geffen, donde está Ana Mendieta. So it's kind of like this constant like, hello, like you guys are touting Carl Andre as this amazing minimalist artist, but he's a murderer. And he like, where is she? You don't even know her work because he cut her life short. And even in the 911 call, him being like, oh, we're both artists, and she was upset that I was doing better than her. And a lot of friends were saying that like when when they were together, they would get drunk very often. They would drink like 4 or 5 bottles of champagne almost every night. And she would kind of start these arguments being like, oh, Carl, there's actually a specific quote. She'd say, Carl, minimalism is over. You already did your thing. So she kind of like
Yeah.
pushed his buttons pretty
Oh,
hard,
yeah.
but not obviously what ended up happening wasn't the way that it should have gone. But yeah, it's something that's really quite bleak in the going through and kind of looking at like the crime scene and everything. So this is for spooky Halloween, just to kind of get you guys in the Spooktober mood. When they went to investigate the body, they noticed that her body, having hit the surface so hard of the roof deli, actually left an imprint in the roof. So, this is, I got this from The Guardian, and they write, even her death echoed her art. So very much like the Silhouette series.
Yes.
It's kind of creepy how it all kind of ties into her death
Well,
as well.
and then, so yeah, I was looking at that piece behind you when, we were talking about her work, and I hadn't seen that particular image, but I was like, ooh, like how eerie. And not only that, like, when she started getting interested in art, like, there was mention that she was interested in like themes, like I said, of the land, body, and also violence toward women. And I'm like, that's really kind of almost like a premonition of what would happen to her. And like, very eerie. I mean, it's completely coincidental, of course, because I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
believe in the
Her
supernatural. But
husband's
yeah,
lawyer actually used the artwork because it's all about death and voodoo and
uh,
violence,
mm,
and to kind of throw shade on her and kind of say that she was suicidal because she had all these always about death. She had one piece that was where the visitors to the gallery would just come upon her and she was covered in white bloody sheet, like dead body, how they cover
Yeah.
them in sheets. So yeah, they used that against her at the trial.
Yeah, which is so
yeah.
ridiculous
Right.
because it's like,
It is. And
used her
also,
artwork.
truly suicidal people do not broadcast their intentions like that. I mean,
Right.
like, if there are people, who do those things, like, where they cut themselves, whatever, it's like, it's a cry for help. It's not like, because if they really intend to do it, they'll do it. That's, I mean, my understanding of usually how that works. So, for them to say, oh, her work is indicative of her suicidal behavior or whatever, it's just total bullshit.
Yeah, 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 and yeah, they were saying that right before her death, she started making like real objects rather than
Mm.
ephemeral works because she wanted to sell them and stuff, and she was excited and optimistic about it. So, yeah, and oh yeah,
Yeah.
she told her friend before she died that she was gonna give up drinking and smoking because she said that female artists only get famous when they're older, so she wanted to live to be an old woman.
And sadly, that is so true. You
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
to outlive all that shit,
Yeah.
outlive all your boyfriends and husbands and whatever your youth puts on you as a serious artist.
Hmm.
So I gotta stick around for like another 50 years.
Right.
At least.
And then yeah, I briefly looked into her husband's work, and
Mm.
I'm kind of taking on the role of a critic of modern art, postmodern art in this podcast. But his work, I honestly do not understand. His apparently okay, one of his most famous ones is Equivalent 8, which is arrangement of 120 fire bricks. And
Mm.
then
At the
people
tape.
are like his other work, Lever, which is revolutionary, and it's an arrangement of 137 fire bricks in a line. So I really don't get it. I really don't get it.
Well, I
Yeah.
gotta say, yeah, I was very curious about this guy too,
Yeah,
whom I also hadn't heard of, honestly.
yeah,
But I look at some of these photos, I'm like, oh, that looks like a sidewalk, or it just looks
right.
like a random, metal plate, whatever. Okay, fine. It's a very niche kind of thing. You have to really know what you're looking at and all that.
Minimalism.
And plus, like, my view was already biased because of what he did to
Yeah.
Mendieta.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, fuck this guy.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because I was telling you guys when we were trying to put the episode together that I kept running into like artist facts where I thought it was a really interesting fact, but then I read into the artist and I was like, oh, he was a racist, or oh, he was pro-slavery. It's like, man, like what the heck? We're all like we're finding out about all these crazy things from all these artists that we learned about and were educated about in school,
Mhm.
and now when you do your research on the side you find out all these things and it's like, wow, man. So
Yeah, that's
I'm glad
why.
that we're
Yeah,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
I think that's important too. And I want to know who the racists were, who the like I want to know all those things because I think it's important. And that raises an interesting question about how do you separate the artist from the art, right? Like
Right.
kind of like Roman Polanski. I love his movies, but man, like the whole the rape of the underage girl, I mean that is just inexcusable, and the fact that he is getting away with it is a crime. And because of that, I feel very conflicted about his projects. I mean, okay, but the good thing about him and Woody Allen is like all their new movies suck, so I don't really care about them. But it's just like, but the older movies that I loved, I'm like, how do I feel about them now because of what I know about the artist?
Mhm.
It's kind of like how my view of the Andre guy is colored because of what he did to his wife.
Right.
So I mean, look, if people still want to see Polanski movies, that's their. It's like a personal choice,
Mm-hmm.
as far as I'm concerned. It's all about how it makes you feel, knowing what you know.
Yeah.
So it's an ongoing question. And, while nobody's perfect, I would sure hope that you don't actively try to murder or oppress someone, And I think if that happens, you should be called out. Yeah. So.
Well, that's why in the intro I say it's about wacky weirdos and wahoos. It seems all artists are once you start looking into them.
Well,
true.
but the weird thing is like, some of these artist behaviors were not considered all that weird, back in the day, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're a misogynist, especially, you were able to get away with that shit for thousands of years.
Yeah. So, no, it's true.
Yeah. So we're looking at it through a different lens. And I think that's why it's been so interesting for me, this project, is like looking at all our art heroes and kind of digging a little deeper and re-examining them, through the eyes of like how we feel about things now. And like, the way we think about now is like equal rights for everybody. And like recognition for those who are not recognized. So yeah, that's why I've been so gravitating toward, like, well, what about Picasso's girlfriend? It's like, we know so much about Picasso,
right,
I'm like, I'm interested in those kind of more obscure things.
Yeah, totally.
And that brings us to fact number 3, which is my fact. And that is that Auguste Rodin's The Thinker used to have his fist on the forehead, and now he has a limp palm on his chin. So this is something called the Mandela Effect. Now, I told Stephanie yesterday what that was. May, are you aware of that?
No, tell me about it.
Mandela Effect. It's like mirrored. So it's named after Nelson Mandela, which apparently when he died in 2013, a lot of people were like, wait, I thought he died in like the 80s. And this opened up this whole thing where a lot of kind of people's collective memories turn out to be just purely false, just like The Thinker. A lot of people remember him like this, where he's in reality like this. And you can actually go online and see people in front of the statue doing this. Even though they're in front of the statue, they can see it. And a lot of people online are taking this so seriously. Like, one of the most common theories is that when Large Hadron Collider went online in like 2012, it somehow split realities or split timelines or merged realities or something. And so now a lot of things are different. I think one of the most famous examples is book series The Berenstain Bears.
Berenstain Bears. I was just going to say.
Yeah, so you know about it. And
Yeah,
my fiance will swear that it's spelled with an E. And, it never was. And there's actually a lot of artwork-based Mandela effects. For example, Henry VIII portrait by Hans Holbein. It's this famous portrait of him in like this weird beret. He's like standing all tough, and you can see like his codpiece coming through his tunic and stuff. And a lot of people remember him holding a chicken leg or a turkey leg, like a drumstick in his head, which never happened. And
I don't remember that.
Yeah, I found this from Scarborough Renaissance Festival, which is like a city in England, a Facebook post from 2013, which says, according to some paintings, one of the earliest turkey leg wielders was Henry VIII, the corpulent 16th century British king who is sometimes depicted holding or chomping on a turkey leg. Apparently no painting like that exists ever. And Simpsons did a parody of Henry VIII where Homer is Henry and he's eating turkey leg and stuff like that. So it's the weirdest things. There's so many of those.
Well, okay, I attribute that to the fact that probably those giant turkey legs were originated at a Renaissance festival, and then like all these people started like eating them, and then that they just kind of collectively brainwash people. But I distinctly remember that painting because I just finished reading the series of books by Hilary Mantel about that time. It's about Thomas Cromwell and Henry VIII, and great books, and they talk about Hans Holbein like going around like painting all these portraits of him, and there's like this passage where there's like a lot of detail mentions like Henry posing and like what went into the portrait and all that kind of stuff. And then so I was looking up those photos because I had to refresh my memory. And yeah, he's always like standing like with his hands on his waist like this. Yeah, there is distinctly no turkey leg.
Yeah, he's actually holding like a brown leather glove in one of his hands, and that could kind of look like a turkey leg. But yeah, a lot of people will swear that it's he's holding a turkey.
How are you gonna hold a turkey leg like this?
Right, exactly.
Hanging out.
He's in the middle of being painted. He just wanted to
snack because he had to pose for 18 hours a day.
It takes a long time, so you need a snack.
But yeah. There's a lot of Mandela Effect about like Berenstain Bears and all that kind of stuff, but there's a lot about art. For example, Georgia O'Keeffe, her name, how it's spelled. A lot of people remember it, one F. It's actually two Fs.
Oh.
Georgia.
Yeah. I would think it was one F.
Right? The Grant Wood's American Gothic, right? A lot of people remember two elderly people, sometimes both wearing glasses, looking straight ahead. Where in reality it's one elderly man, one younger woman and she's looking at him and no glasses.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
So I know. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of these, I kind of, I remember them the correct way, I guess. But there's some that get me. For example, the dogs playing poker. It's like a series of 16 paintings as like an advertisement for a cigar company. And a lot of people remember at least one of the dogs wearing this like green bookie visor, but apparently never in none of the paintings is that happening.
Really? I have to look this stuff up.
We got made with one.
That's really cool.
I remember a green visor. I feel like that's something that because the room is green. Maybe that's why it kind of tricks your mind.
But yeah, and then people call. Like I said, there's these pictures of people holding the thinker pose with the fist to their forehead. People who are into the Mandela Effect call these the residues. Like the photograph got altered, the sculpture got altered, but people posing in front of it didn't get altered because they're organic or whatever. And there's one great residue. It comes from George Bernard Shaw, the famous writer who was actually at the unveiling of the thinker. And then he went back to his house with this photographer friend, and he was like, "Hey, do a nude portrait of me while I do the thinker pose." And he is in the nude doing thinker pose with the thing to his head, with the fist to his head. So yeah, a lot of people are like, "Whoa, this is the proof that the sculpture was like that."
Yeah, well, is it, or is it just the psychology of like the thinker? So you think your brain, and so that you're like, okay, brain. So then you put your hand here.
I was just gonna say that, May, because so the title Le Pensée or Penseur or whatever is that was like a secondary title. I think originally when he did it, he was calling it The Poet, and I don't know if it was supposed to be like in reference to Dante.
I think so.
And so the thinker is sort of like an alternate thing. So, but I think you're absolutely right, May, in that the thinker, of course, they're talking about the brain.
Yeah.
So I think that is a really interesting psychology, and I think that's how magicians and fortune tellers and stuff like that, because they know how people think.
Exactly.
That's a common general human response. Unless you're a really different thinker, if you're autistic or something like that, I think that's how those people are able to sort of make those different connections and breakthroughs, which I think is so fascinating.
Because I feel like it's a case that people remember archetypes instead of the actual details. Like one of the Mandela effects that's not really art related, but is that the Monopoly man, that he has a monocle, which he doesn't. But we associate monocles with rich old-timey men in top hats, so people remember monocle.
Oh, and Peanuts.
Yeah, Mr. Peanut, right? Yeah.
I know he has a monocle.
Yeah. So
But until you said that, I was thinking, oh yeah, of course the Monopoly guy has a monocle.
right? So yeah,
That's not.
people
But he
remember
does
that.
have a mustache, right?
He
Doesn't
does
he
have
have
a
a
mustache,
mustache?
yes.
Thank God.
But yeah. And then I did some research on Rodin as well, just outside of the
Yes.
Mandela Effect. And one of my favorite things that I came across is the Kiss sculpture, one of his most famous ones. And it's two people kissing, but it's apparently it's not two lovers, but two people condemned to hell. It was like
Oh.
it was two people like cheating, and then the brother or the lover of the woman stabbed them, and they went straight to hell. I think it's a story from Dante's Inferno, right? But my favorite thing about that is that there was a like this eccentric British collector who commissioned a copy from Rodin, and he specified that the copy must have prominent erection because it's that he shouldn't hide it because he was a pagan and just wanted kind of what was it? He wanted it in the classical Greek tradition of prominent genitalia.
Oh, is
Oh.
that in the classical Greek?
Yeah, prominent genitalia, yes, not an erection. I don't think I've ever seen a classical Greek statue with an
No, if
erection.
anything, if you look at those classical
Right.
statues, they're all there's like shrinkage.
Yeah.
It's not emphasized. They're very tiny.
Right,
You know,
yeah.
like Michelangelo's David. It's like, oh, okay.
But then, yeah.
It's a little underwhelming.
Apparently, once he got the statue, he put it like at the back of his barn or something, so he might have not liked it. Maybe the erection wasn't big enough or something.
Oh, maybe.
Oh my God, what a weirdo.
Right.
How interesting.
And and then while researching that statue, I came across this funny tidbit: is that under French law, no more than 12 original casts of works of Rodin can be made.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes, because his work was like fairly easy to make forgeries of. And he was complaining about it like as far back as like 1901. And so that's when the law was instituted. So I think it's like 15. And that's why there's only like 14 cities have the Burghers of Calais, like copies of that statue. So yeah, he was like a art superstar. I mean, he was so rich and famous, and like, in his lifetime, he saw the kind of success that only a few artists ever attain or dream about. So of course I had to go to Camille Claudel, his female like assistant, protege, whatever. So he met her while he was subbing for a friend in some class, and she was like this 18-year-old hottie, and they ended up developing this like intense relationship. And I don't know if either of you guys ever saw that movie back in the 90s called Camille Claudel with Isabelle Adjani.
Whoa.
No.
And it had like Gerard Depardieu as Rodin, and it was a very good movie. But basically, after this intense relationship, and she was a very acclaimed sculptor as well. But like after their breakup, like because he was already married when he met her, and he was carrying on this affair while he was married, and they both knew about each other, and the wife just kind of, she wasn't happy about it, but she wasn't going to leave him. But eventually their romance ended, or he ended it, and it kind of drove her crazy. And well, not crazy, but she was committed to a mental institution, and she was there for 30 years, even though like her relatives, vouch for her saying she's not crazy, So meanwhile, while Rodin is off enjoying the fruits of his successes, like his ex-girlfriend is committed to some insane asylum for 30 years,
Wow.
and it's just sad, very sad. You know what? I think that just means don't get mixed up with the wrong artist.
Or
Is
any
really
artist,
the
really.
lesson here. It's
Damn.
like,
All the stories.
you might be like, and why is it always like, well, of course it is. I'm like, why am I saying why? Because, they're like this famous, artist, superstar artist guy. And of course, like these young women artists are very drawn to that. And the older male artists are very drawn to like, the beauty and the talent, whatever. But, it always like, almost always ends badly for the woman, I mean, at the very least, they're forgotten.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you could hope for that.
Yeah.
Or you know,
Thrown
or you
out the
get
window.
murdered or something. I don't know. But yeah, it's another example of this sort of inequity that hopefully is, you know, not ending, because I still feel like we have a long way to go, but at least it's being recognized. And like, and like, of course, all the women are always beautiful, and like these guys, sorry, nothing to write home about, you know? Like,
Yeah.
ugh. Oh, okay. I say this because Rodin had like believed in that idea that like your physical characteristics are indicative of like your inner, like your personality, you know, your morals or whatever. And I'm thinking, dude, have you looked in a mirror? Like, he looks crazy.
Right.
He looks like a lunatic. So I don't know where he gets this idea. So anyway, yeah, that's end rant. That's it.
End rant. But yeah. See, speaking of his success, he did the kind of artwork that put him on in the spotlight first, The Gates of Hell, right? Where he got most of his statue ideas from, like The Thinker and The Kiss. That was commissioned, and it was supposed to be delivered 5 years later. Took him 37 years.
Whoops! Missed that deadline.
Right?
The museum was never built for where it was supposed to go.
Yeah, he built it for a museum. Right? It just they were waiting for it and waiting, and then they went out of business.
They just kept waiting, and that's it.
Oh, you know, I think like when I was in Zurich, the art museum that's there in town, I want to say that the Gates of Hell, they had a reproduction of that at that museum. I'm gonna have to check. Maybe that's one of the sites where they got permission to do that.
Yeah,
and look, to give Rodin his due, you know, he sort of revolutionized sculpture during his time, and you know, he was enormously talented and all that. I'm not slighting his abilities or whatnot, but it's like, you know.
He was apparently so good that when he exhibited one of his works, The Age of Bronze, everybody accused him of just not sculpting it by hand, but kind of putting on cast over a model and doing it that way, because it was so realistic and nobody believed it. So he had to go and look, this is my model and this is where it's different.
Wow.
Yeah, he was very much interested in depicting like the naturalist form, like realistically, not like idealized or not as an allegory for something, but just like depicting the human physicality as a thing in itself.
Right. Which is funny, because he was kind of first inspired by Michelangelo, who was very much into the idealized form, you know.
Yeah, I guess that's where he started. But then, like, you know, his style was definitely a lot more loose, right?
Yeah, it's almost like impressionistic sculpture.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So this has been Mona Lisa Has No Eyebrows, and my name is Michael. I'm with Stephanie and May, and you can find us on these social medias.